Welcome back. Now, President Akufo-Addo says Ghana is on the path to become vaccine self-sufficient after breaking grounds for the construction of a factory with capacity to produce 600 million vaccines of different types every year. This initiative is supported by the European Union, who have given a grant of 5 million euros. According to the president, the factory will ensure that Ghana does not become a pawn of vaccine nationalism, as was witnessed during the height of COVID-19.
A private sector-led consortium of Ghanaian pharmaceutical companies, which will help our nation realize the dream of becoming self-sufficient in the production and manufacture of vaccines. Ladies and gentlemen, it all started on 28th February 2021 in update 24 of what has come to be known as the Fellow Ghanaian series of addresses to the nation at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when I declared to the Ghanaian people my determination to see to the manufacture of vaccines here in Ghana. The vaccine nationalism that was played out by the developed world with the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines meant that we had to take urgent, critical steps towards making sure that never again would we be victims or pawns of the international vaccine order. It was imperative that we took our destiny into our own hands. Ghana embraced fully the lessons it taught us, as well as the direction to which it is pointing us. In particular, for us, it has given us a good sense of how important it is to strengthen our unity and solidarity with our fellow African countries, and has provided us with the motivation, if any was needed, to be self-reliant. Whilst appreciating the COVAX, AU, and AVAT in COVID-19 vaccine supply initiatives, we're venturing into vaccine development and manufacturing with our sister African countries of Rwanda and Senegal. And together, we're determined to become vaccine manufacturing hubs in sub-Saharan Africa. We want to achieve self-sufficiency in vaccine production to meet future national, regional, and continental needs for health security. We shall not then in the future be at the mercy of foreign vaccine nationalism and geopolitics.
All right, now let's stay in the pharmaceutical space. The Chief Executive Officer of Aspen, Africa's largest pharmaceutical company, is asking the government of Ghana to take immediate steps to check the influx of counterfeit pharmaceutical products into the country. Now, the business executive, who doubles as chairperson of BRICS Business Council in South Africa, says he's concerned about the heightened levels of importation of substandard medication and its devastating implications for public health. Now, Dr. Stavros Nikolaou says that the situation can be checked if African countries halt the importation of medication and instead manufacture medication on the continent to meet specific needs. He was speaking in an exclusive interview with Blaise Soga on the sidelines of the African Continental Free Trade Area Business Summit in Cape Town, South Africa, which we will bring to you later. But let's go to South Africa right now, where, of course, Blaise Soga has been for a few days now in Cape Town. We are going to speak to Blaise. Also, we're joined by Louis Yao Afful. He's the Group Executive Director of African Continental Free Trade Policy Network in Ghana. Dr. Gonse Motloatse, I hope I've said your name right, forgive me if I haven't, is the CEO of YNG Healthcare Solutions. He joins us too. We also have Mr. McGill, Mr. Patrick McGill, Patrick McGee. He's the Managing Director of Africa Original, which is in South Africa. Mr. McGee, Mr. Mutloatse, and all of you joining us on Zoom, thank you very much for your time and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We also have Blessed Soga, our very own Blessed, who is in South Africa to cover the events of this conference. Blessed, it is good to have you. We'll hear from you and how the event is going in a minute. But let's come to this issue of counterfeit drugs. Mr. McGee, this is scary. Exactly how are we allowing such a number of potentially dangerous drugs into the continent? Where are they coming from, and why are they getting in so easily?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on this show. And we just had a very interesting conversation with people in the industry around counterfeits, drugs mainly. And so just to give a quick bit of background, when we look at it in the world, counterfeit, not only drugs, but counterfeit products, the estimates say that it represents between $1 trillion to $4.5 trillion, which is basically the GDP of Germany or Japan. And it's actually larger than the GDP of Africa, and that's globally. We estimate that about a quarter of that happens on the continent because, unfortunately, our porous borders mean that a lot of these goods can come in to our countries. And it is, as you were mentioning, having devastating effects. Not only we have WHO numbers that prove that every year 120,000 people die of fake malaria pills. And that's every year. And that is only what has been reported to the WHO. So you can just even imagine the amount of people that are not even reporting that. When you ask me, how are we letting this happen? When we know that it's representing $4.3 trillion, we always say there's actually 4.3 trillion reasons for people to be importing and distributing these fake or substandard goods. It is as well estimated that in some countries, mainly in West Africa, up to 70% of medicine is fake. And the problem when you have that is that there is no active substance in the medicine. And that's why people might be taking some drugs to heal cancers, to heal malaria, but they're not feeling any effect. And it has very much with drugs, it has fatal consequences. And so just to quickly mention that we have signed a contract with the AFCFTA to deploy our technology. And our technology, which is part of the original, is a platform that will give access to consumers. We give them access to make better, safer choices when they're consuming products.
Now, Dr. Mutloatse, as the companies that are providing healthcare solutions here in Africa, how are you leveraging technology to fill in the gap that regulation might be leaving open? How are you able to use the technology that already exists? Because we're aware that there are so many ways to check counterfeit drugs. How are you using that to protect your customers? Do we have Dr. Mutloatse on the line? Do we have him? Okay. Well, let me bring in Mr. Affle here. Look, it's obvious that there is some regulatory lapse. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible for such drugs to come in, bearing in mind the amount of technology we have to spot them. So how can the African Continental Free Trade arrangements be part of the solution to protect consumers on the continent?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you, your viewers and colleagues. And thank you also, Blessing. The immediate challenge is that the African Continental Free Trade, if you take the protocol of services, there are 12 priority areas that are supposed to have been negotiated by this time. One key one is healthcare. But that has not been done yet, which is very, very serious. If you take the 12 priority sectors that have been discussed, if you take ICT, tourism, transport, we have not yet tackled healthcare and education. And I was thinking that I even made mention to the Secretary General, His Excellency, when I visited him, that look, if we have not been taught by COVID, then we are going to make the same mistakes. COVID has taught us that we should always be on our guard. So why are we keeping the healthcare, the priority sector, which is so key, not yet negotiated? Because within that priority sector, you're going to have vaccines, you're going to have a whole lot of, for example, the phytosanitary, that was also part of the convention, the AU. All these processes are going to come to play, and then we are going to move to the next stage of which countries are going to base on national offer and acceptance, or national interest and acceptance, because under services, it's not going to play like the way most play. Services are based upon countries collaborating. So therefore, you're going to know, okay, Kenya is interested in collaborating with Ghana when it comes to healthcare in this area. That is how the services play. Until that, we are not going to be able to move any further because it has not yet been negotiated by the parties. It is still in the process. So by the end of this year, that should be out of the way. When that is done, then of course, if these 12 priorities are now negotiated, then parties will stick to the agreement. And thank God we have the African CDC. All these institutions are more or less supporting the operationalization of the agreement. So I think that we need to urge our countries, our ministries of trade, we need to urge all parties to speed it up the negotiations on healthcare, which vaccines and pharmaceuticals. And in a way, this year, the Africa Continental Free Trade, I think since last year, they identified 5 key areas that they would like to really focus on. Pharmaceuticals is one of them. So I'm very happy that these are popping up, and I think that it need to be taken more seriously. Especially, we need to look at our borders, because we say that, I remember that during the COVID time, the Secretary General, there was a kind of ease to allow vaccines and pharmaceutical products to really quickly be taken into consideration by the borders. If that system is still there, then we have to go back to the drawing table and really put our checks and guidance, especially when some of these products are moving, not because there's that clause that free movement of people and free movement of goods. No, that clause was given because of the public situation that was happening, to allow drugs to facilitate across the borders with ease, with a little bit flexibility. They ought to go back to that system and really tighten up, since these things are popping up.
Let me ask you quickly, what do you recognize as the main bottleneck to the very quick adoption of this all-important medical aspect of these AFTA arrangements?
If the question is for me, like I said, we need to really look at the healthcare negotiations quickly, because there is a need to develop herbal medicine. It is very key on the agenda, herbal medicine. And it is only Ghana and I think South Africa that have a tertiary institution that is really doing courses on herbal medicine. And then also our own, the Mampong. I met a team of people, and we put together the estimate of what we are going to benefit if we look at if we adopt plant medicine as part of what is supposed to go into the negotiations.
Is that what is holding up the negotiation, the absence of plant medicine?
No, I think that they decided not to look at it as a priority. They decided to focus on transport, tourism, and also the ones I mentioned, ICT, banking, as their priority. But I'm saying that COVID should teach us that should be brought up, because currently they are focusing on how to look at protocol in women and youth, and then also digital trade. But beyond that, we need to tackle the 12 priority services, priority sectors under services, including healthcare and education. So that should be on the table. But however, plant medicine should be on the table so that countries will ratify it, adopt it, and then we look at the technology aspect of how to make sure that it becomes part of our traditional healthcare system.
Now, Patrick McGee is still with us. The solution that has been proposed is that Africa needs to start manufacturing its own medicines. Do we have the capacity? Are we there yet?
So thanks for that question. I don't think we're there yet, because obviously to get your own vaccines plants in place needs a lot of financing, and then you need to make sure that the demand is going to be there for the supply that is produced. So I don't think we're yet there. I think it's coming. I think it is very important to have our own medication produced on the continent. But I think what is probably at the moment more important is to get the brands and the companies that are producing medicine to give us their kind of unique identifiers. Because if you don't know, on every single packet of medicine, you have a unique identifier which tells you exactly where this medicine is from and who it's intended to. But at the moment, those brands are not yet sharing that information. And if they did share that information, using our application, you would be able to know if whatever medicine is coming to any country, be it Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, or South Africa, you would be able to know if it's a real or a fake medicine. I don't know if you remember at the end of last year, end of 2022, a big drama happened in the Gambia where there was a cough syrup coming from India, which actually killed 66 to 80 young children under the age of 2 years old. And that's the question that we should be asking. How do we allow those kind of medications to come into our countries and to come into Africa unchecked and actually create the deaths of 66 children, which I find that is terrible. And we weren't able, and nothing has happened yet, to either the company that was selling those fake cough syrups with probably some really dangerous kind of products inside, and no action has been taken. And that's where I think we need as well to be focusing to make sure, because if we don't have a healthy population, the AFCFTA and the protocols that are around it will never function correctly. And we have that opportunity now as we're building this AFCFTA to design and to have product safety as a core component, which will then as well accelerate the production locally of these kind of products, especially in the manufacturing sector.
Right. Now we're joined by our very own Blizzard Soga, who's been paying rapt attention to all the events unfolding in Cape Town. Blizzard, it's good to connect with you once again. I'm sure you're having quite an eye-opening experience at this event. Let's take a step back for a moment. Tell us how things have gone on this second day of proceedings, and then we'll come back and hone in on the pharmaceutical issue again. Do we have Blizzard? Perhaps if you can unmute your microphone for us, Blizzard.
Well, Kojo, if you can hear me, apologies for that. I was just indicating earlier that a lot is going on here. Just a couple of hours ago, I was interacting with the Deputy Customs boss, who's also attending this private sector engagement. And there's a lot unfolding as far as the imports and export sector and the whole customs division is concerned. We'll bring that as the days go by. But the focus today has been on standards, which Maji has been talking about. I'm just holding in my hands now the state of the illicit economy report issued by Original. Their safety standards organization, so they are very much particular about meeting the standards. If we have to trade as the African continent, that must be done to meet the standards of the world. And very shocking details contained in that document. For instance, we're learning that the illicit economy is ranging on the average between 1.6 trillion US dollars and 2.2 trillion. That's the range. So that's how much, in terms of volumes, we're having illicit drug trade, counterfeit products flowing into Africa. And It deserves an international attention from all actors just to deal with this problem. And there are more findings contained in this very report that was issued. It goes to the heart of the point that, of course, the AFTA must not just be focused on trading, but we must trade in products that meet the standards as we need to have it. So these are some of the matters that have been coming up. Of course, you have the likes of Yarafo who are also looking at how to empower of course, the SMEs to also get on board, because the belief is that we shouldn't be letting go of the opportunities involved in this free trade area to multinationals alone. So meeting standards, focus on small-scale businesses, and, of course, the related matters of ensuring that the trade itself is accelerated. These are matters that are on the front burner as far as the private sector summit is concerned.
Did you get a chance to pick the brain of the Deputy Customs boss on this matter?
Well, in fact, he's very alarmed about what's happening now. The issue of counterfeit products moving into our country is of concern to him. And then, for instance, we have the unique problem of our borders being porous. So some of the measures that are being taken to, for instance, check what's happening at the Elugu side and places that border to the likes of Côte d'Ivoire, where you have the influx of a lot of substandard goods and goods coming in illegally. He's been talking about some of the steps being taken to check that. Beyond that as well, he believes that we must meet standards, and that the fact that we're having a preferential trade arrangement should not mean that it should be a free-for-all where phytosanitary conditions would not be looked at. So the Ghanaian government, and by extension the Ghana Revenue Authority, says it will be paying attention to that. And if we must, of course, give preference to these products coming in the context of AFTA, standards must be on the lookout.
So did you get the impression that this was the first time he was coming across this alarming statistic, over 80% of medications on the continent being counterfeit?
Certainly not, but it's also happening because of the lack, in my estimation, of the adequate technology to deal with what's happening. For instance, you have MacG from Original just telling you a couple of minutes ago that we need increased or enhanced technology that will help us track these products, where they are coming from, and for us to know the source. Of course, if you know the source, you're able to track where the product is moving through around the world. Then you have control over the kind of product that comes into your territory. We cannot say as of now that entirely manufacturing, products such as these pharmaceutical ones in Africa alone would have solved the problem. Certainly, there will be some imports from other third countries. So you would expect that standards must be key for every participating member under this continental free trade area. And that was also featuring in the conversation I had with the chairperson of a board member actually of the BRICS economy, or the BRICS Business Council, and also the CEO for Aspen, who happens to be Dr. Stavros, who's been talking to us about how their operations in Ghana is helping to improve standards. He's also alarmed about the fact that these are medical supplies. You don't want to toy with the public health of the country. And so government needs to take immediate steps to enhance public safety. I'm sure that in this report as well, that's been released by Original, we'll find out more. MacG is still with us, so I'm sure that he'll be able to tell us more. It's not just about drugs. There are illicit activities happening outside of the pharmaceutical industry as well, which he may provide some details on.
Why don't we do that now? Mr. MacG, you're with us. Give us a bit of a broader brush over the issues that are raised by your report.
Yes, thank you. So, as Besset was mentioning, counterfeit doesn't only happen in medication. It's actually in every...
It would appear that we're struggling with our connection to Mr. MacG. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It was, I forgot to unmute. Very sorry. So, as I was mentioning, and as Blessed mentioned, counterfeit doesn't only happen in the pharmaceutical or the medicinal sector. It's something that's across every sector that you can think of. And actually, let's say the 4 other sectors that are very highly touched by counterfeit are alcohol, cigarettes, carbonated drinks, so your soft drinks, water, and then medication is the other big one. And so it's a real vast operation that is done by criminal networks, terrorism networks, who actually, it's a mean for them to finance themselves. And it's very worrying that they have such a foothold and a grip on the continent, and it's happening at a global scale. And in order to stop that, I really believe, as has been mentioned, that technology is the answer. And we have the tools are available. The products are already marked that you can really know if it's a real or a fake product. So there shouldn't be any excuse. And as I said before, again, we have this opportunity with the AFCFTA to start it right and to make sure that all our products are safely made, are authentic, are original, and that they're going to actually benefit whoever is consuming them, rather than unfortunately have some unfortunate consequences, which often happens with the death of people. And if we can't be waiting till people die to react to these to this plague that's happening on the continent. And then another thing, just to add, when we're talking about counterfeit products or illicitly traded products, these products don't get taxed. So governments are losing out on a huge revenues that they would normally be collecting from tax. They estimate, for example, that in view of counterfeit cigarettes and illicitly traded cigarettes, that South Africa is losing something like 500 billion rands a year. So it's crazy numbers, and that's the reason we know that these people are ahead of the game, and they have a lot of not only opportunities, but a lot of reasons for why they're counterfeiting all these goods. But just to give you as well other aspects of where other products that are highly counterfeited apart from medication is, like, for example, baby formula. And obviously, when you think of it, when I was learning about these things, it's shocking that people are actually doing that. It's actually criminal. It's really disappointing that we actually are in this state. And again, it doesn't only happen in Africa. It's really a global issue, and that's why we've created this technology and this app to try and fight it by getting mass verification. Because if everybody is starting to verify their products, then we'll be as well able to know where are the hotspots, where are the fake medication going, and it'll give law enforcement agencies the opportunity to act immediately when there is an alert that a fake product has been used someplace or has been bought in any shop around.
Let me ask you this. I mean, if your study was able to uncover all of these counterfeit products, were you able to uncover any of the culprits? Did your research point you in any particular directions?
So the research points into a few directions. One, that counterfeit goods at the moment, a lot of them are made actually outside of the continent. We know that for medication, India seems to be one of the high manufacturers of counterfeit products. And obviously, we know that not only are these, it's a lot of criminal organizations. There's been some proof that terrorist organizations such as the Al-Qaeda's and ISIS of this world have been using counterfeit goods to finance their operations. So we know that who they are. And then often, like, there is obviously issues in terms of counterfeit goods. It brings on corruption. So they're there and they're probably paying sometimes some custom officials in order to let the goods come into the country. So it's a whole array, and it's a very complicated kind of topic, because it's a tentaculous topic that is affecting a lot of parts of our society, and a lot of people are actually involved in this plague.
I'm curious about that baby formula. Were you able to trace the origin of that?
No, so but we know it's been found in South Africa, I actually even have some friends that have had an issue with baby formula, and it's a global issue. But I think we're able, thanks to technology, to combat it and to make Africa as a whole, through the FCFTA, a safe place for us to consume our products.
I want to bring you in, Mr. Affle, because according to Mr. McGee, we're not quite there yet when it comes to manufacturing our own medication here on the continent. I wonder if you will agree, from where you sit as an after policy watcher. In Ghana, we've just launched the biggest vaccine manufacturing facility on the continent. What does that mean? I mean, first of all, do you agree that we are not there yet? And what will it take for us to get there? And how can AFTA play a role in this?
Thank you very much. I think that if we continue to sit on the verge of thinking that we'll never be somewhere, we'll never make a milestone. I don't totally agree that we're not there yet, because we are now in the time of knowledge transfer. We are now in the time of exporting skills. And therefore, what aspect are we not there yet? I agree with him when it comes to the vaccines. But we can do, there have been many medications that are going through systematic improvement, so we can do better. What we need to look at is that under the CFTA, there is a need to harmonize standards and certifications. And there is this organization in Niger that needs to be given a stronger revamp called the ASU, African, Standards Organization. They want to harmonize all standards and certification, whether it has to do with pharmaceuticals or products, under one umbrella, so that whatever standard that is South Africa, the same is measured at Niger, the same is measured at Ghana and Nigeria. Secondly, the Afri-Exim Bank is building a huge quality assurance facility so that it will check product assurance and quality, so that product that could not be exported maybe outside Africa because of certain restrictions and whatever it is, standards, can go back to this facility still under our ISO standards and then re-exported. One of the things that we have to understand is that, and I was glad that Blessing was talking about it, the ACFTA is a referee. The ACFTA cannot enforce. The member states are supposed to enforce what they sign on to. And I remember the last time the Secretary General complaining that his problem has to do with the fact that there is no much legislation to customs. In other words, the parties have signed to it, but when you go to their customs, there's no much legislation enforcing what they have signed on to check. We need to even modernize our borders. If you take Ghana, you go to some of our borders, you see a large land just bare. When we need to build, I was doing a paper with the United Nations on this, and we realized that, look, we need to even modernize these borders, build standards, checking, technology. If these fake products are coming from by land and they reach there, how would these customs officers even, how would they test to know what the viability of these products? There's nothing. It's only about just checking, searching them, and then you say, go. You need to modernize these borders, build facilities. If it has to do with pharmaceuticals, it has to do with defense. I quite remember Professor, this fiber optic inventor. He's building, drone satellites, which will act as manning the borders in terms of for defense purposes. We need to modernize our borders, because the first stop shop is that these people who are also involved in the fake ones are trying to evade custom procedures. Apart from that, most of them don't know much about this whole after thing we are talking about. In other words, the grassroots, there's the link between corporate and then the grassroots. So for example, My good friend Maji will be in South Africa at a corporate level. He finishes the product, it comes to the grassroots, those who are supposed to the final sellers. They have no knowledge about standards. They have no knowledge that this thing you cannot resell when it is not really approved. They also go through a polarized or an impoverished border, and it just comes through. Then finally, the capacity building for these customs officers to be able to reject a product when they know very well that it does not meet certain standards. These are critical issues that has nothing to do with our inability to be able to push for. Finally, I heard my good friend, saying that most of the products are coming from India. The question you ask yourself is, where is the destination? If it's coming from outside Africa, the rules of origin say that the reason why we are coming under free trade is that we said that there is the need for preferential treatment among AFTA member states. Any product that is coming outside Africa should be subjected to tariffs and duties. Therefore, if a product is coming outside Africa into a free trade area and is coming into a member state, it is the responsibility of that member state to subject that product to stringent customer procedures. Most of the time, if it is under corrupt officials, then they are not going to give any concessions at all. So it just passes through. And that is against the layer 1 of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade, because they said custom is cooperation. We are not an external custom yet, it's cooperation. We are cooperating. And the sad thing is that most of the countries are not cooperating when it comes to borders and custom procedures. And that is one of the reasons is really making it difficult for us to really allow this kind of revealing product and counterfeit to be passing through our borders. So DSCFTA, in terms of a corporate and then a grassroots, there should be a real linkage so that the people will really understand what it's all about, and then also modernize our customs, and then also making sure that our standards is harmonized in Africa.
Now, Blessed, if you're with us, again, I'm interested in the appetite of the private sector. They are the ones who are leading this whole event in South Africa. What is the appetite of the private sector to be the solution to this problem? We're bringing in trillions of dollars worth of fake medication. What does the private sector want to do? First of all, to ensure that they bridge the gap, fix the problem, and also become a source of import duty and revenue to governments, because no doubt these fake medications are not, they are not being taxed properly when they are entering the country. So yeah, what's the private sector thinking?
Well, I must state that when the Secretary General of the Continental Free Trade Area did his press briefing on Sunday, it was clear that this conference or the summit that's happening now is much more about the private sector. So this is not an optics moment for government officials to simply come around, take pictures, make the big political statements and go home. This is about the key industry players coming together to discuss their common challenges so they are able to find solutions to them. The clear posture is that, yes, the private sector is willing to participate in this Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but the bottlenecks must be eliminated. And part of the challenges, of course, will have to do with this illicit trade that we're talking about here, because obviously it could pose the issue of unfair competition to the genuine businesses that are willing to trade and to bring in their products. Also, it may engender issues of mistrust, because, for instance, if you have in the pharmaceutical sector alone heightened levels of illicit movements of goods and services, that can also bring about a lot of challenges. So it's been part of the issues that the private sector is raising, except to say that the posture is that, yes, we want to trade, but if we have to trade, give us the room to trade by removing all the hurdles and bottlenecks, and also let us meet the standards so that we ensure that once we're trading, we're all equally helping our people. So that's been the posture ever since this summit started.
Right.
Excuse me. a good friend. Yes.
Yeah.
A quick one. Patrick made a very important point that they are not cooperating. Some of the people, the private sector in the industry, are not sharing information. And that is where the business forum, the purpose of the Africa Business Forum initially was called the Africa Business Forum, which comes under the Africa Business Council under the EU, to bring private sector people. The reason why most of them are not sharing it's because currently we now have the competition policy, which has been the protocol on competition. We were not having the competition protocol, we're not having the intellectual property protocol, and we're not having investment. These three have been adopted as of last month, but its implementation, I'm told, will take about 3 years. There are most of these countries don't have competition laws. They don't have competition laws. They don't have competition authorities. What is the way of our patents? How is it like? So they are not ready to even share information among themselves because one company might be more like a monopoly or whatever it is. They fear that kind of competition, but under a good competitive structure system, it shouldn't be. So we need to make sure that the competition policy, which has been adopted, will start seeing daylight from next year instead of 3 years. Other than that, we'll have companies outside Africa still dominating the market because they know that there is no competition law or policy South Africa has. But that country, about 90% of AFTA members, they don't have competition policy, competition laws, no authorities.
Mr. McGee, I think that brings me quite neatly to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. What are you going to do with this report and the information contained? I mean, apart from the audience at this after event, who else are you targeting with this information to ensure that some action can be taken across the continent?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So obviously who we're targeting is first any African citizen as an end consumer needs to know about the issues that are linked to counterfeit goods, and for their own safety, they need to know about it. But obviously we're targeting not only governments, but as well all the big institutions, all the development institutions, and most importantly, we want to put this in front of brands because the brands we need their help in order to fight the counterfeit, and they need to be working with us. And so basically we're targeting everybody that is active on the continent, but I would say brands, governments, and the development institutions, and obviously the consumers. Those are the main targets, and we want to go as far as possible in terms of sharing the findings that we've had on this report, which has the specific focus on Africa.
What has been the response so far from those who have had access to it?
So the response has been people are actually shocked that there's such a level of almost gangsterism in this in counterfeit goods, and I think people are getting to grips that any product that you might be consuming has the potential of being counterfeited. And that we need to be very vigilant, and especially when we were talking about medication, in terms of making sure we don't have the tragedies that happened in Gambia last year, in South Africa, in a tavern. 22 teens died from fake alcohol. And all these events, it needs to stop. And people are I think with this report, people are realizing the extent of the problem. And so at the moment, yeah, it's getting the word out there, and the feedback has been positive in terms that we're actually highlighting a real issue. So at the moment, I think we're quite pleased with the response, and it's really about raising awareness around these issues that we're facing.
Mr. Afo reminded us of a point you made about a reluctance to share information on the part of the manufacturers of these of genuine pharmaceutical products, these identifiers that they are not sharing. Help us understand. I mean, what do they stand to lose? Why do they not want these identifiers to be available to the African market?
And we've had conversations with around 5 of the top 10 pharmaceuticals globally, and some of their responses have actually been very, very shocking when it comes to when we ask them, why don't we share this information with the first caregivers, which would be like, let's say, the pharmacists. And their answer, and I will not name the company that said it, but their answer was like, we don't trust the pharmacists in Africa. We're afraid that they're going to copy these unique identifiers and start making fake goods. And we were very shocked by this kind of response, which was as well made in the presence of some AFCFTA officials. And with this kind of mentality, it's going to be very difficult to advance. But the main reason I would say they're reluctant to share this kind of information is probably because they're afraid that the people they share it with will reproduce these mechanisms and these identifiers to then start counterfeiting themselves, but which I don't believe is the case at all. And that's something that we've been pushing with His Excellency as well, the Secretary General, to change that perception that everybody on the continent has an interest in faking or counterfeiting goods.
One would wonder what the purpose of these identifiers is, if not to identify these drugs as genuine. And who needs to be able to identify these drugs as genuine more than those who are going to swallow them into their bodies?
Exactly.
Well, this is interesting, and I think as these events unfold, we want to keep an eye on it and keep track of how this information is disseminated across the continent and how countries can benefit. Blessed, before you all leave us, tell us what else we can look forward to in the coming days as this event continues in Cape Town.
Well, activities are beginning to round up, and all we're expecting at the end of the day is the private sector ready to push or give a push to the Continental Free Trade Area.
Blessed, it was a bit difficult to hear you there. I don't know if you have something obstructing your microphone.
Well, if you can hear me, Koja, I was just saying that activities about winding up here in Cape Town. But the big question is the private sector ready to give a further boost or accelerate the Continental Free Trade Area? The answer is yes. The posture I see is that the private sector is indeed ready, except that the bottlenecks have to be dealt with and the standards must be met. So these are the driving factors that would have to be on the lookout for and see if indeed they would be addressed by the coordinating secretariat. And once these issues are addressed, of course, Africa will be on its way to trade in a market of over 1 billion. And that's what we're all on the lookout for.
Blessed, thank you so much for keeping us up to date, keeping us excited about what's happening in South Africa. We certainly wish you a safe trip back. And thank you very much to you, Mr. McGee and Mr. Affle, for your insightful contributions. All right, well, listen, let's take a breather, stretch your legs, but don't go far because we're back after these.